Hello everyone. In today's topic, we are going to discuss about membranes. So membranes, a thin layer of tissue covering a surface or lining a cavity, space or organs. So it is a thin layer of tissue. So covering a surface or lining a cavity. What is the cavity which is present in the body? The cranial cavity, where the brain is being present, the cranial cavity, and the vertebral cavity where the spinal cord is present, that is called the vertebral cavity. The thoracic cavity where the lungs are being present, the abdominal cavity where the abdominal organs, and the pelvic cavity where the pelvic organs are present. So these are the cavities where the membranes are lining up. So thin layer of tissue covering a surface or lining a cavity, space or organs, or it can line an organ, any of the organs it can line. So the membranes are classified into epithelial membrane and connective tissue membrane. These are the two main types of classification. So the types of epithelial and the connective tissue membrane. The epithelial membranes are classified into mucous membrane, serous membrane and cutaneous membrane. So as we have seen in earlier slide, the epithelial membrane and the connective tissue membrane. So these are the main two types. So the epithelial membrane type is the mucous membrane, serous membrane and the cutaneous membrane. These are the three types. And the connective tissue membrane are classified into the synovial membrane. So these are the types of epithelial and the connective tissue membrane. So as you can see in this diagram, the epithelial membrane, the first one is the mucous membrane, the white one, which where you can see it is the mucous membrane. It is lining the nasal tract, the mouth, the esophagus, the lungs, the bronchus, the stomach, the lungs, everywhere. So this is the mucous membrane. So cutaneous membrane is also called skin. The skin is the normal term which we use for the cutaneous membrane. So that is the cutaneous membrane. So serous membrane is the one which produces serous fluid that is mainly in the abdominal part. Okay, so abdominal organs and the lungs where you can see the serous fluid. And the visceral pleura, that means the outer layer is known as the visceral pleura. What is visceral is the inner layer which lines the organ is called the visceral and the outer layer is called the parietal. So parietal means outer, visceral means inner, which is nearer to the organ, which is surrounding the organs. As we have seen that a thin layer covering a surface or a cavity or space or organ. So the visceral is the one. Visceral, anything which comes in visceral, that is called, which is lining the organ, is called as visceral. So the diaphragm, visceral peritoneum, which is lining the organs. No, this is lining the stomach. So parietal is lining the outside layer. So parietal means outside, visceral means inside. So and the synovial membrane, which is protecting the joints, movable joints, which is protecting, that is called as the synovial membrane. So the epithelial, first we will say about the epithelial membrane. They are formed from epithelial tissue attached to a layer of connective tissue. So these are mainly formed by the epithelial tissue and they are attached to a layer of connective tissue. They line many internal structures and cavities. So the mucus which contains glands, serous which secretes the fluids, and the cutaneous which makes up the skin. So what is mucus which contains the glands and produce the mucus fluid is called as the mucus, that is called as the mucous membrane. And the serous membrane means which contains the serous fluid which secretes the fluid is called the serous membrane. And the cutaneous is the one which is called as the, normally called, we take it as skin, that is called as the cutaneous membrane. So these are the three types of epithelial membrane. So as you can see in this diagram, so the mucous membrane, that is lining up the epithelium and it is attached to the connective tissue. This is the mucous membrane. Serous membrane, the same thing, which is lining by the epithelium and it's attached to the connective tissue. That is the areolar tissue is it's a type of connective tissue. It is attached to a layer of connective tissue. The same thing. And here what you can see is the synovial membrane. So synovial membrane is the one which is protecting the movable joints, that is called the synovial membrane over here. So first we will see about the type of epithelial membrane, that is the mucous membrane. We will see. This is the moist lining of the alimentary, respiratory and genitourinary tract, and it is sometimes referred to as mucosa. Normally we say that the mucosa is being present over there. So that is the mucous membrane fluid, that is called the mucosa. and it is the lining the alimentary canal. Alimentary in the sense from the mouth to the digestive process, that is called the alimentary tract, and the respiratory tract is the lungs, the nasal path and the lungs, that is called the respiratory, and the genitourinary tract, that is the genital and the urinary tract, that is called the genitourinary tract, and these are lined by the mucosa. The membrane surface consists of the epithelial cells, and that some of these cells produce a secretion called the mucus, that is a slimy tenacious fluid. So the fluid which is being very slimy, which is very sticky, not sticky, it's very it's slimy like thing, that is called as the mucus, and it is produced by the epithelial, some of the epithelial cells, that is called the epithelial. What are the names of the epithelial cells? The goblet cells. So as the cells fills up with the mucus, they have the appearance of the goblet or flask, and also known as the goblet cells. So when these epithelial cells are filled with the mucus, so once they are the one, the epithelial cells are the one which produces the mucus. So when the mucus is being filled in this epithelial cells, they produce a shape like goblet or the flask shape. So that cells are called as the goblet cells. So as you can see here, in our mouth we have our saliva, that is the mucus being produced in our mouth. So when these are the cells which is being producing the saliva, when they are filled, they give appearance of a goblet. So they are called as the goblet cells. As the fluid accumulates, the cell becomes distended and finally bursts, discharging the mucus onto the free surface. So these cells are the one which produces, and they become distended and they finally burst. When it is full, they finally burst and discharging the mucus onto our mouth. That is called as the mucous membrane. So organs lined by mucous membrane has a moist slippery surface. So whatever organ which is being lined by this mucous membrane has a moist and a slippery surface will be there. In respiratory tract, it traps the inhaled particles, preventing them from entering the alveoli of the lungs. So you can see here, these are the mucous membrane. So when we are inhaling the air, which contain most of the air contains very polluted and they contain dust particles. So when this dust particles are sticking to this moist surface, so that in the alveoli which is being present at the end of the lungs, so that is not being affected. So most of the lung diseases are being reduced because of this mucous membrane, which contains a sticky fluid called the mucus, that is trapping all the dust particles and all the things which is not needed for the lungs. So that is being when they are inhaled, they are being preventing from entering the alveoli. The mucus protects the membrane from drying, mechanical and the chemical injury. So the mucus are the one which protect from drying. So from drying it is being protecting. And mechanical, what is the mechanical thing? So when two organs are being rubbed with each other, so mechanical injuries can happen. So that is being protected by this mucus. And the chemical injury, these also when some chemicals or whatever comes in contact, that is being protected by this mucous membrane. So next one is the serous membrane. So serous membrane or serosa secrete a serous watery fluid. So there is the serous membrane which produces a watery fluid, that is called the serosa. They consist of a double layer of loose areolar connective tissue which are being lined up by the squamous epithelium. As we see, that is lined up by the epithelial cells, epithelium and the connective tissue membrane. Here it is being lined up by the loose areolar connective tissue and lined up by the squamous epithelium. The parietal layer lines the cavity and the visceral layer surrounds the organs within the cavity. As we have already discussed that the parietal means the outer and the visceral means inner, that is being surrounding the inside the organ, that is called the visceral thing. So the two layers are separated by serous fluid, separated by the epithelium. So where the parietal and the visceral, there is a gap between that space, that is being filled by the serous fluid. So as you see in the heart, this is a heart. So parietal pericardium is the outer one, the visceral pericardium is the inside one. So between that, the pericardial cavity, that is being filled with the serous fluid. So the same thing is here. Parietal pleura means outer, visceral pleura means inner. The pleural cavity filled with the serous fluid, and this diagram. So this is the serous membrane. There are three sites where the serous membranes are found. The pleura lining the thoracic cavity and surrounding the organ. So as we have seen that the space is being filled with the serous fluid. The pericardium lining the pericardial cavity and surrounding the heart. So this is the pericardial cavity surrounded by the pericardial fluid, that is the serous fluid. The peritoneum lining the abdominal cavity and surrounding the abdominal organs. So organs which is surrounded by a layer that's called the visceral peritoneum, and outer the organs are called the parietal peritoneum. So the fluid which is being filled between these two, it is called as the serous fluid. So serous membrane, the serous fluid between the visceral and the parietal layers enables an organ to glide freely within the cavity without being damaged by friction between it and adjacent organs. So as you can see that when two organs are being rubbed to each other, some friction is being produced, but this is being mainly reduced by the serous fluid, which reduces the damage being produced by this friction. For example, the heart changes its size and shape during each beat, and the friction damage is prevented by the arrangement of pericardium and the serous fluid. So when you know how the heart beats fast, so friction is being produced, friction is being produced, but it is being reduced and prevented, the damage is being prevented by this fluid, that is the pericardial fluid, that is the serous fluid which is filling this pericardial cavity. That is being the reason it alters shape, size, and friction is prevented by this one. That is the serous membrane. So in epithelial membrane, the last is the cutaneous membrane. The cutaneous membrane is the technical term for our skin. So normally we say skin, but the technical term is cutaneous membrane. It is located outside the body. It is known as the skin. The skin primary role is to help protect the rest of the body tissues and organs from physical damage such as the abrasions, chemical damage, biological damage such as microorganisms. So whatever comes in contact with our body, they first have to attack our skin and then they have to go to our internal organs. So that is the main primary, that is the protection that is being placed. So it is composed of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So the skin is being composed of the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. What are the 5 layers of skin? There are the stratum corneum, lucidium, granulosum, spinosum, and the basal layer. So these are the 5 layers. So mainly the skin is divided into epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis. So epidermis have the 5 layers. These are the 5 layers. So it is composed of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Its underlying dermis is mostly dense connective tissue. The underlying tissues are the dense connective tissue. So this is the cutaneous membrane. So last one is the connective tissue membrane. That is, the connective tissue membrane is formed from connective tissue. As the name says that it is made up of connective tissue. These membranes encapsulate organs such as the kidneys and line a movable joint. So these membranes are being found in the kidneys and it mainly lines the movable joints. So the synovial membrane is a type of connective tissue membrane that lines the cavity of a freely movable joint which cushion organs against each other during muscle activity. As you know that how much we walk, whatever things we do with our hands, we write, we use our hands, wrist part very more and our knees more. So these areas are being cushioned and being protected by this synovial membrane. So this is the kneecap where you can see that we know that something is being hard and being present. That is called the bursa, and the one which support is called the tendon. So these are being protected by an outer layer that is called as the synovial membrane. So you can see clearly over here. This membrane lines the cavities of a movable joints and surround tendons that could be injured by rubbing against bone. Example, over the wrist joint. So when so many movements are being happening in a place where in a joint that is being surrounded by the tendon and it could be injured very much. So that is being protected by this synovial membrane. It is not epithelial membrane, but instead it consists of areolar connective tissue and the elastic fiber. So it is mainly composed of the areolar connective tissue and the elastic fibers. The synovial membrane secretes clear, sticky, oily synovial fluid which lubricates and nourishes the joint. So this is the layer, the synovial membrane, which produces a fluid that is called as the synovial membrane, which consists of the synovial fluid. The synovial membrane, which is protecting the synovial membrane, which So thank you so much. So today's topic is over. So we'll meet in our next topic. If you have any doubts, just kindly post in the comment section below.